All right, so the next kind of extension, and you shouldn't be attempting this one until you've completed the matching activity with the envelopes and where you have equations of lines, graphs, and tables. This comes after that, so make sure you're done that. This is an extension. So this is when we have an equation in the form where both the x and the y are on the same side of the equation, because remember, we're used to seeing equations like this or something like that. Okay, and this clearly is not the same because in normally we have y is equal to 2x plus 1, so y and x are on opposite sides of the equal sign, whereas in this equation they're both on the same side. So there's two ways you can solve this. One is the long and tedious method, which I don't really like doing, but I'll show you, is you plug in values for x and y and you make a table of values. So you can pick, I like to pick, like, you should pick between like -2 and +2, but I'll just do between -1 and 1 for today. And you can pick any values. It really doesn't matter what you pick. You have to pick like at least 3 points. So then that way you can verify that it's a straight line. So you always want to make sure you pick at least 3 points for x. So you're going to start plugging them into the equation. So 3 times -1 minus 2y is equal to 6. And I'm going to solve for y because I want to know what y is to put it here. So I need to figure out what y is to put it there. So that's going to be -3 minus 2y is equal to 6. And this is just a two-step equation. So remember our last unit, we add 3 to both sides. Then we get -2y is equal to 9. And then divided by -2, divided by -2, y is equal to -9 over 2. And then we would do that, etc. Okay. And then you can solve this way as well. Like you can keep going. So you can go 3 times 0 equals negative. Oh, sorry. Erase that. Minus 2y is equal to 6. So that's 0 minus 2y is equal to 6. That's -2y is equal to 6. So divided by -2, divided by -2, y crosses at -3. And if you put 1 into the equation, you get 3 times 1 minus 2y is equal to 6. And you get 3 minus 2y is equal to 6. Now it's just a two-step equation. Minus 3, you get -2y is equal to 6 minus 3, which is 3. Divided by -2, divided by -2. And you get y is equal to -3 over 2. Then you can go and plot these points. And I'm going to start with my my x or my y-intercept where x is equal to 0. So when x is equal to 0, y is equal to -3. When x is equal to -1, y is equal to -9 over 2, which is the same as like 4.5. So it's going to put about there. And the last one is when y is equal to 1. Or sorry, when x is equal to 1, y is equal to -3 over 2, which is the same as like 1.5. So now we can see that we have those my 3 dots and they line a straight line. So I can add my my straight line on top of that. So you can just when you're in OneNote, you can pick your double-edged arrow line thing. I'm using this one. I'm just gonna switch that a little bit, try to move that so it's a little bit better. And then you guys will you need to put these arrows on because these arrows show that it's continuous and it goes on forever. So that's one way to solve it. That's one way to graph an equation like that. But if you've watched the second video in lesson 4, you'll see that there's also another way where you can look at, say, this equation, and you know that the plus 1 is this equation, these are not equal. But say if I were to look at this equation, the plus 1 is where it crosses the y-axis, and then 2 is the slope. So why don't we solve this equation using the slope and it's called the slope and intercept forms. Let's change that around. So now we're just actually going to treat this equation just like our last unit, like a two-step equation. And what we want to do is we want to isolate the y because we want it in that form, and you'll see it sometimes written like this. Y is equal to mx plus b, where m is your slope and b is your y-intercept. So we're going to get it into this form. Y is equal to mx plus b. Right now we have x and y on the same side, so we're going to want to move things around. So first thing is we want to get the x over. So we're just going to move it as a unit. So we're going to be left with negative 2y is equal to, I'm going to write the x first, so the negative 3x, and then it's a positive 6. So even though there's no sign in front of the 6, it always means a positive. So I could write it like this, but that's not in the same form as that. This has the x first, this one has the x second. It's just easier to write it like this. So just always try to write it like that. So just gonna erase that. Okay, so now we're starting to get something that looks like that. But now everything kind of looks like that except for this negative 2. So we got to get rid of that negative 2. So when we divide this by negative 2, actually let me undo that. So when we divide this by negative 2, we have to divide the whole thing by negative 2. So you divide every single term by negative 2. So you divide this term by negative 2 and this term by negative 2. The common error is that students normally just divide the 6 by the negative 2, but you cannot forget that you also have to divide the 3 by the negative 2. Everything has to be divided by negative 2. So then when you rewrite your equation, you're left with y is equal to, and then a negative 3 divided by negative 2, the negatives cancel out, and you're left with just 3 over 2, and just leave it as 3 over 2. And then you're going to have negative 6, you're going to have 6 divided by negative 2, which is negative 3. So now you have this equation of a line where you have y is equal to 3 over 2x minus 3. And so we know that 3 over 2 is our slope. So again, remember from my last video, that's rise over run. And then you have negative 3 is your y-intercept. Okay, so let's go over to our graph. And I'm going to graph this equation of line using my slope and y-intercept. Oh, I didn't finish writing that word. Okay, so I'm going to use blue to plot my points. So this starts at, I usually start at my y-intercept. So I'm going to look at my graph and where x is 0, y is negative 3. And oh, look, we have the exact same point. And 3 over 2 means I go up 3 over 2. So it means I'm going to go up 3. So 1, 2, 3, and then over 2. 1, 2. So that's going to go right there. And then I also can go backwards the other way, or I can just keep going. Like I can keep going from this point, and I go 1, 2, 3, and then over 2. 1, 2. So it's going to be right there. Okay, and we can actually start to see this is exactly the same line. So when I go to draw my straight edge, I'm just going to go right from there. And there we go. And you can see it's exactly the same line. So both ways work the same. It's just, it might be easier to do this way to change it into y-intercept form. So you can get an equation that looks like this. And then you can use these tricks here to graph your equation, just like the last unit, just like the last lesson. So this is taking an equation that looks like this with x and y on the both sides, changing it to this form, and then graphing it from there.